Hey everyone, it's getting late in the evening on Tuesday night, and this is the first installment of Current Events. The reason I'm at home doing this is because we just had President Trump's Supreme Court nomination released, and so it's a very current event, and I like to talk about stuff that's going on when it's happening. So we're going to talk, again, it's the first installment of Current Events. We're going to talk about three things tonight: the Supreme Court nomination, executive powers, and some kind of technology and the law, because I like to talk about that stuff. So going forward, I'm going to be asking you to bring in some current events. We'll have a forum where you can post current events. I'll talk a little bit more about that in an email or on Moodle. But this is something that I'll have you write up, bring in things that you find about the law, write about them, respond to them, and we'll do that going forward. So let's talk about the Supreme Court nomination. So President Trump just nominated Neil Gorsuch to be as his Supreme Court nominee, and we're going to actually talk. This came a little sooner than I expected it to. We're going to talk in 2 weeks about how people are nominated to the Supreme Court, what that process looks like. So I'll just mention that quickly. He's been nominated. That does not mean he is appointed yet. He still has to go through a whole process of going through the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the Senate votes on it. What's always hotly debated in the Supreme Court nomination process is the background and the judicial philosophy of the justice. So in this case, Trump has appointed a presumably conservative justice with a conservative judicial philosophy. A conservative judicial philosophy typically looks like when they read the Constitution of the United States, they interpret it with its original meaning. So take, for instance, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, right? They would read that and say, you have a right to bear arms. That's what was written in the Constitution. That's what the founding fathers intended, and we're gonna hold to that. We're gonna stick with that original intent. So someone who's got a more liberal judicial philosophy would read that and say, okay, so the Constitution isn't immutable. It's changing. It's a living document. It should adjust to the mores and changing society. What things are in flux and what people believe. It's not going to be static. It's not. This isn't the 1790s, right? This is these are the 2000s. Things have come a long way. So the right to bear arms was relevant when you had these militias that were trying to stand up to a central government, and now that's really not relevant. We don't want to promote the idea of a militia, so the right to bear arms means something different, right? That's more of a living interpretation. So that's an example of kind of the strict interpretation versus the living Constitution interpretation. So that's what we're really debating here, and that's what they will be looking for out of Judge Gorsuch, is that kind of a background. But then those with a liberal, who are interested in a liberal judicial philosophy, will want to fight that, and this will be where the battle is, right? And we saw that President Obama's nomination was the Senate never voted on it. That they never had a vote in protest. And what's going to happen now? Is the Senate going to vote, or are they going to protest President Trump's nominee to just try to hold this up and sort of kind of wreak havoc? So it will get political. They've typically gone pretty quickly in the past, but this could be a different animal. So we're gonna probably talk about this again as things go on, and we actually get into the confirmation hearings and that process goes. So stay tuned on the Supreme Court nomination. Next thing we've been hearing about a lot this past week or 2 weeks are President Trump's executive orders. So the office of a president is typically pretty limited. They don't have a lot of powers. Most of the lawmaking ability is congressional. Congress has to vote, create laws, implement laws. The president's responsible for enforcing a lot of those laws. He's also responsible now, and this is where executive powers come in, is that what does the president have the ability to do? Typically, there'll be specific laws that Congress enacts that give the president specific powers to do things. So it'll enumerate what he or she can do. In a lot of what he's doing right now, what President Trump is doing right now is sort of expanding what it means to what those executive powers mean. So inferring things. For instance, the president has the ability to enforce the laws, the immigration laws, right? So that's his responsibility. So he's sort of expanding what he says he can enforce. We get into this debate a lot. We have a lot in the Bush and Obama administrations on military powers. The president has military powers. He's the commander-in-chief of the army. He cannot wage war. That takes an official declaration of war, takes an act of Congress. But the president has the military power to command and direct the military forces. So Obama used that for targeting with drones, heavily with drones. President Bush also used that heavily for drone targeting and mobilizing troops to do certain things. So that's been one area that executive powers have been notable in the last few years. So how do you change an executive order if you don't like it? And we have a lot of people right now protesting that they don't like certain executive orders. You get Congress to enact a specific law that says, so for instance, there was an executive order limiting the number of refugees, right? So this is a great example. Congress has said that the president can allow up to, I don't remember what it was, 110,000 refugees a year. Something they said a certain number. The president can a maximum number, and the president is responsible, has the power to choose that number, and has been traditionally picked that number every year. President Trump has said he wants to limit that to 50,000 refugees a year and limit certain countries. So how do you change that? Congress gets together and they say, we disagree with what the president has done. We want to enact a new law that says the United States is going to absolutely bring in the maximum number of refugees, 110 or 200,000, whatever number they set it at. The president can't change that. And the president can't choose which countries are not on the list. So that's how you change an executive order. Let's stop. I was going to talk about one more thing. I think I'll save it for next week. I've already gone about 8 or 9 minutes by the time I wrap this up, and so we'll save a current event, another current event for next time. But these are things that are relevant, so that's why I want to talk to you about them tonight as the Supreme Court nomination is coming out. We're going to be talking a lot about these things, I suspect, over the course of the semester. I will regularly, maybe not every week, probably every other week, do a little video montage on current events. So stay tuned for that, and if there are things you want to talk about specifically or you have questions, feel free to send me an email, and I will, or write it in the comments or something, and I'll be happy to address it in the next video. Thanks.